Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplaceddraws.com where music comes to life. And my guest today is the driving force behind one of the seminal alt rock bands of the 90s. Candlebox is celebrating their 30th anniversary of their landmark debut album and also saying farewell with a fantastic new record called The Long Goodbye and a Final Tour. Here to talk about all of it, please welcome Kevin Martin. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey man, how are you? Nice to be
I'm
here.
Doing great. So, there's a lot to unpack, but let's start with the new record, The Long Goodbye. It's sometimes hard for a legacy band to get a fair shake when it comes to releasing new music. But I think if people really give this record a listen, they're going to hear a pretty great rock record. I think it's your strongest probably since the debut, and it makes for a perfect bookend. For the first time, you co-wrote a lot on this record. Usually you do it all on your own. What was it like working with other people on this one?
Well, I mean, it's the beauty of it is finding another way to say, what I've been saying for 30 years. It's an interesting concept when you start writing with a young audience or young um, producers or creatives because they look at things so much differently. I've been doing this for 30, well, with the band 32 years, but as a lyricist and a singer for a long time. And I found that when I was trying to write for this record, I was stepping on the same statements that I'd made before, and I didn't want to do that. And so I called my producer, Don Miggs, and I said, can you arrange some writing with some of the young talent in Nashville? And he did. And I went in with some really brilliant young creatives that just brought this kind of element of surprise to me lyrically, and also solidified kind of what it was that I was trying to say in their way of saying it.
Hmm.
And so it made it really, really easy. It was very enjoyable. So songs that I would spend maybe 2 or 3 days on working on lyrically came to in a matter of 15 to 20 minutes to 30 minutes. And it was at that point, it's just about, moving little things around so that you can find the right way to say it, which sounds more like me. So I really enjoyed it. And I kind of wish I'd been doing it like that my entire career, because it's just so much more fun.
Yeah. And now, through each lineup of the band, with each record, you've really evolved Candlebox. With this record and kind of this new way of creating, does it feel that like you've now evolved it as far as it could go? Why end it now? Especially at a time when, 90s nostalgia is taking off and you have this strong new record and new way of writing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been a long time coming. I think for me, really what it was about is putting the record out and the tour out, and ending my career after 30 years of Candlebox kind of, you know, being in people's ears or being on their mind. I I was just so kind of like, I don't think I've got it in me to do another 10 years. Emotionally and physically, the way I sing and what I write about, there are songs that to this day still weigh on me very heavily that I've written. And it takes a lot of spirit to do this day in and day out for 30 years. And I think that I had just realized that I had one record left in me, and that's all I'm going to give it. I don't. I've got lots of friends that still make music that I think shouldn't be making music, and
Mm.
there are a lot of artists out there that will go well past their prime, and that's just not something I wanted to do. I really enjoyed being at home with my family during COVID. My relationship with my wife and my son was something that I had never realized was so strained.
Mm.
Um, because I was always gone. And having that connection for 20 months made me realize I love them a lot more than I do the music that I make.
Mm. Yeah.
So that was
That,
kind of the catalyst for me.
yeah, that makes perfect sense. You've been on tour most of the summer so far, and you still have a lot more dates coming up. your sets have been concentrating, on celebrating the 30th anniversary of the first record and even working in some stuff off of this new record. Do those early songs feel 30 years old when you play them? Or now that, a fairly new lineup and some great new strong material, do they now feel refreshed?
They feel refreshed, and it has a lot to do with the guys in the band. Island, Brian, BJ, and Adam. They bring such a different element to those songs that are 30 years old. I mean, when we wrote Far Behind, that was written in the fall of 91 and was recorded in the spring of 92. God, that's a long time ago. So when you put new musicians in that kind of arena of these songs that maybe sound a certain way, but they've got different fingers and different amps, and the energy is different, it really refreshes it for me. I don't know how it does that for the audience. I guess it's probably something I should have asked some of the people that come to see us play. But for me, it's just I'm just so grateful that I get to do it still. That people will let me come and play these shows and sing these songs that have that affected their lives for 30 years, and it's special to me. So maybe it's just as refreshed for them as well.
Hmm. Well, as a fan who has seen you with different lineups over the years, it is,
Oh, but
there is something new yet familiar. You get those same familiar feelings, but you feel like the song has grown with me over 30 years.
that's great. Okay, I'm glad.
Yeah, looking back at the start of the band, Seattle, early 90s, music was changing. You guys seem to have really walked that line between what became the grunge scene and then what became sort of the alt rock scene a little bit later. Did you feel a kinship with those rising Seattle bands, like Mudhoney and Nirvana and Soundgarden? Or did you see yourself as something a little bit different from what they were doing?
Very different. Yeah, I mean, certainly, 5 years in age different as well. All of us were 14 years old when, when a lot of the Soundgarden, Screaming Trees, Grunt Truck, Scheme Yard records were coming out. Certainly Mudhoney as well. Uh, I mean, I think the Deep Six, that vinyl release, I was 15 when that came out, and those guys would have been 20, 21. So that certainly was some of the main difference was just our ages, but we weren't Pete, Marty, Scott, and myself. We didn't grow up in that community musically. So Scott, his favorite drummer was Steve Gadd. If you asked any other drummer in Seattle, if Steve Gadd was their favorite, maybe it would be Matt Cameron that would say that. Most drummers would say John Bonham, or something like that. So we had kind of this different eclectic mix of musicianship in our band that kind of created that first record and the sound of that first record. I grew up on punk rock. Pete grew up on Iron Maiden and heavy metal and Black Sabbath, and Marty grew up on Jacques Pastori, and kind of the creative baseline community. So I think we just had so much difference in our musicality than those other bands that we didn't really fit into it. And certainly, we were, Candlebox is kind of the journey of the Seattle music scene, whereas, Nirvana was the Velvet Underground, or, or something like that. So we had that kind of arena rock sensibility that those other bands just didn't, I don't think, gravitated towards. And, I love Journey. I grew up listening to them. My brother Dennis was a big fan, and Steve Perry's voice to me was probably one of the greatest rock and roll voices of all time. So, I think that that's all of what has helped to kind of create that Seattle sound for Candlebox. And that's why I think that when you listen to all those bands, Pearl Jam, Sweetwater, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Mother Love Bone, Mudhoney, I mean, the list goes on, obviously. Every single one of them is so much different than the other. That I always found that the name grunge was just kind of a way of saying Seattle, where they could have just said the Seattle sound, because that's really what it was.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, New York punk in the 70s, the Talking
Mhm.
Heads, Blondie, and the Ramones, none of them
Yeah,
sounded alike, but
exactly.
everybody gets lumped into that one bucket,
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, speaking of that, you guys had massive early success with that first record. The three singles really took off. Was it sort of a double-edged sword though, in that it put you into that bucket that becomes hard to get out of as you evolve and expand? You keep getting pigeonholed in this same thing that you're trying to grow from.
Yeah, I mean, none of us were really prepared for the success of the record. As a band, certainly, I know that I wasn't. You go out on the road and in the spring of 1993, and by the fall of 1994, you're playing your own arena shows. You're headlining them. I mean, that's you know that happened with Pearl Jam. That happened with Nirvana. That happened with Soundgarden. That happened with Alice in Chains. I think that it was such a fresh sound um, and style of music that people were just instantly, gravitated towards it. But with that came, so much stress that you put on yourself to, this next record's got to be better than the first record. And there were a lot of casualties from rapid success. Lane Staley with Alice in Chains, Kurt Cobain with Nirvana. That rapid growth, if you don't want it and you're not looking for it, it scares the hell out of you. And some people can deal with it, some people can't. But it certainly affected Candlebox in a very negative way. We made a risky decision to produce the Lucy record the way we did. We took a complete right turn on the direction of songwriting and how we were producing music. And it backfired, in a sense to where we only sold 1 million copies. We didn't sell 7 million. But we were setting ourselves up for the change that we wanted to continue to do, the evolution of the band. We never thought to ourselves to rewrite Far Behind. We never thought to ourselves to rewrite Cover Me or You. We knew that we wanted to progress as an artist and as a band, and that's what we did.
So this new album and tour, both called The Long Goodbye, do you have a final show set on your calendar, and where do you see it taking place?
Um, I think our final show is in Santiago, Chile. There is talk of us doing Australia at the end of the year or maybe into the spring. But as far as I know, I think the last show is Santiago, Chile on October 14th, something like that. It's really, but we have, like I said, there's Australia on the books, there's Europe on the books. I mean, this may extend into the spring of next year, but certainly in the States, it's going to be ending, I believe, on September 23rd in Houston, Texas. So that's our last stateside date.
Do you see any of the original lineup coming back at all for these dates, just to pop in and sort of do one last show?
Pete is coming to play with us for the Florida dates because he lives in Tampa. So he's going to do Jacksonville, Tampa, and Boca. But the original band, we're doing something with the Seattle Symphony for Christmas of 2024, and that'll be just Pete, Barty Scott, and myself at the Seattle Symphony. So that'll be kind of the last Candlebox, original band show.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah,
And
fingers crossed it comes. Fingers crossed it works. We don't know.
yeah, and now we kind of talked a little earlier how you sort of said when you began working with other people on this record that you sort of felt like you've said the things you needed to say and you were ready to kind of walk away from this. Do you see this as the end of just Candlebox, but Kevin Martin may continue to put records out here or there? Or are you looking for yourself to just say, I'm done with the business?
I think I'm done with the business. I have a bunch of side projects that I've done over the years that I really enjoy. I've got one with actually my producer, Don Miggs, who did this record with us. We have a thing called Future Trash, which we have we have a record done. It's ready to come out. We could actually go, play shows on it if we wanted. But I think I'm just, there's a nice little bow that I'm going to put on this thing and wrap it up and just put it in the closet. And maybe occasionally I'll pull it out and take a look at the pictures. But yeah, I'm done with it. I'm done with this career and this life. It's been a blast, but I'd much rather be at home with my wife and my son than out here on a stinky tour bus in the middle of Arkansas right now, where it's 98 degrees out and 98% humidity.
After these 30 years, what do you want the legacy of Candlebox to be?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The little band from Seattle that could, I mean, I think there was a lot of negativity around the Candlebox from that community. We were never really welcomed by, the Soundgardens or the, Alice in Chains, even though when I was best friends with Lane Staley and Chris Cornell, there was never kind of that, hey, little bro, come here sort of thing, which, kind of sucked. And to live with that for those first few years when we could have certainly used a big brother to kind of help us stay focused on what we were doing. That was difficult. But I think that our legacy is that we stood the test of time. We continue to put out good record after good record. In my opinion, we've released some brilliant albums, and that we never really let that kind of stop us from being the creative force that we were. And a lot of bands, I think, they can certainly outside influence can affect a lot of what a band continues to do, and we just stayed the course. And I think that that's kind of why we still have the fans that we have. We're still here 30 years later. We continue to put out records that made people think and push the boundaries of our creativity. And I think the legacy will be that. The Candlebox was a band that came out at a pretty difficult time, but survived that. And the test of time, tells the tale.
Well, we've been spending some time here with Kevin Martin, the band Candlebox. They have a new record coming out on August 25th called The Long Goodbye. And Kevin, like I said, is a fan from the beginning. I thank you for 3 decades of amazing music. You're going out on top. I love this record. If people give it a fair shake, it should end up on people's best of lists at the end of the year. So
Oh,
thank you
thank you.
very much.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Appreciate it.
Have a great one.
All right. Take care, brother.
Bye.
Bye.